guys. So let's just think about something. I've been thinking about it a long time. And it's this thing with you're constantly having a high frequency. You know, most of us understand the importance of wanting to maintain a high frequency. But, constantly having a high frequency could possibly turn you into a robot. Here's why. Because you're never ever allowed to experience any kind of frustration any day of your life. You're never ever allowed to experience any kind of sadness any day of your life. You're never ever just supposed to have any kind of anger, any kind of disappointment. You're not supposed to experience that any day of your life in order to have a high frequency. See, I know the main point is that majority of the time you want to be positive. You want to maintain a high energy frequency, because really it's just a high energy frequency. I get the point of people saying, thoughts are things and your thoughts create your reality. But all of your thoughts don't always create your reality, because if every thought that you had created your reality, what kind of reality would you have? Like I said, if you're supposed to think one way every single time just to keep your frequency high, you would turn into a cyborg. You would turn into a robot. That's what you would turn into, because you won't ever experience energy in motion, which is emotions. You will never experience that constantly having to stay at one part of the scale. Okay, one part of that frequency scale. Okay, if you always have to stay at the top of that scale like that, then you never you never have a range of emotions. Now, it's true that your emotions should be balanced. I do agree that it's good to balance your emotions. It's good to be balanced in life. But if you are a human being, if you are human. Okay, if you are human, every now and then you might experience sadness. Every now and then you might experience disappointment. It might not be every day of your life, but it might just be 2 or 3 times out the year. And those 2 or 3 times out the year might just last maybe 1 or 2 days each. Okay, and so what if it lowers your frequency, and then something might happen, and they say, well, you attracted that to you. They say, well, your thoughts attracted that. You gotta watch your thoughts. But then they're not giving you a chance to experience anything. What if you just found out that, maybe a close friend, maybe a relative, maybe a sibling, or maybe one of your parents could have fell fatally ill, or maybe they could have died. You're not supposed to be sad about it, because then you can attract negative entities. You see what I'm talking about? You're not allowed to have any kind of energy and emotion. You're not allowed to have emotion if you always have to have this high frequency. Okay? And if you always have to have this high frequency, then you have to stay out of your shadow. That doesn't leave you room to do shadow work. When you have to constantly stay in a high frequency, then there is no room for shadow work. Because when you do shadow work and you face the dark part of yourself, you're going to experience some emotions that might be below that, on the lower part of that scale. You might experience emotions that might be on the lower part of that scale if you face your shadow. So I think all of this talk about constantly having a high frequency and your thoughts create your reality, I agree with that. Most of my days, every day, I try to stay in a love frequency. But I'm not going to sit here and act like you never experience any kind of frustration in your life. I'm not going to act like frustrating days just don't exist. And then you got to pretend that it's not there and always have this high frequency. I think that is a trick to turn people into robots. I think that's a trick to turn people into robots. As a matter of fact, I know it is. Okay, but then again, you got to be careful with I understand being careful with the low frequencies, especially things like what's going on in the world, and letting things really put fear in you, like the economic crisis and like so much violence in the world and things like that. Well, see, things like that, You got to make sure you don't let that kind of fear fester, okay? It's not to say that you're never supposed to experience any kind of emotion connected to what might happen. But you got to make sure that you don't let it last too long, okay? You got to work on it. You got to acknowledge that it's there. Because what these high frequency speaking folks want you to do is not even acknowledge that it's even there. So when you say something might happen, if somebody says something might happen with the economy, and for example, you might say, oh, I'm fearful of what might happen with the economy. Then some high frequency light worker person might say, oh, don't have fear. It's not good to have fear. Well, no, you don't want to have fear, but at the same time, you want to face your shadow. So when somebody tells you not to ever have fear, then you have to ignore what's in your shadow. Because fear might be a part of your shadow, and you're never allowed to do shadow work. Because if you do any kind of shadow work, you might experience some fear. This is the problem I have with this constant high frequency preaching. Okay? So when somebody tell you not to ever have fear, I just think that's not right for them to say that, because how in the world are you ever supposed to face your shadow, do shadow work, and transmute that part of yourself if you never face it? If you never face it, you can't ignore what's going on. If you have fear about something, you have fear. What you're supposed to do is acknowledge that it's there, and then move on from there and see what you're going to do about it. But you can't not just, oh, I'm not supposed to have fear, so let me try to change the way I feel. You need to acknowledge that it's there, and then move on, and then work on it. But people just telling you just not to have it, period. It's just, to me, they giving you terrible advice, because when they tell you that you're just not supposed to have it, they're telling you that you don't have room to do any shadow work on yourself, because that fear could be a part of your shadow. Sorry about that. That fear could be a part of your shadow. So now they're telling you not to go. Now they're telling you not to do any shadow work, because you're going to experience things. But anyway, I'm going to have to get off of here. I'm about to go into a restaurant here. And you guys just let me know what you think, and I will talk to you soon.